Now, we should understand a couple of basic things. China is roughly the same size as the US economy right now in aggregate. Depends how you measure things. There are always two ways to measure things. One is at the prices of each country's own markets, and then you convert the yuan output to dollar output with the market exchange rate, and that's called market prices. And the other is a common set of prices that you apply to the goods and services of each country. That's called purchasing power parity adjusted prices. And by the market prices, China's economy in the aggregate is something like 3/4 of the size of the US in dollar terms. China's 4 times larger. So that would mean 3/4 times 1/4 or 3/16 the size, or roughly in per capita terms, 20% of the US economy in total size, 3/4. If you look at it at international prices or purchasing power adjusted prices, China's a bigger economy. And the IMF gives us data all the time in what is called the World Economic Outlook. You can go to imf.org and just look at the data, which I do 10 times a day for my job. And if you look at the purchasing power adjusted prices, China is about 30% larger than the United States in absolute size. So 1.3 divided by 4, because the population is 4 times larger. So in per person terms, about 30% or 35% of the US. China's poorer per capita than the United States, but it's a big economy because 1.4 billion people is a lot more than 335 million people, which is the US population. Now, that's freaking out the policymakers in the US. They're bigger. How dare they be bigger? But it's kind of arithmetic. The only way that China could be smaller than the US is to stay at a per capita income less than 1/4 of America. But why should they? Because China's filled with clever people, with good entrepreneurs, with technology. Technology flows in this world. It always has, and it will continue to. And China now is absolutely in the front ranks of scientific breakthroughs and of technological innovation, arguably ahead in many, many sectors, comparable in many, and behind in some. But a superpower in science and technology, and with superb universities and all of the things that make for a high-income country. And why not? China was the world leader for 1,000 years at least. It lost that lead by a terrible policy error in the year 1434 when the Ming court stopped the great fleet of Admiral Zheng He, and China went protectionist, and the next time it was really deeply exposed to the world is when British steamers were coming up the river to bomb the Qing imperial properties, the First Opium War. So China is going to be successful, and it's not going to stay at less than 1/4 of US per capita income. It's going to continue to grow. And incidentally, you read these days op-eds, oh, China's miracle's over, China's finished, the Chinese economy is collapsing. This is so ignorant, I can't even tell you. China, by the way, will have business cycles like the United States does. It will have financial booms and busts. Nobody has figured out how to avoid financial crises in the last 300 years of market economy. So China no doubt has too much debt in some cities and in some real estate enterprises, no doubt. But China's going to continue to grow, and it's going to continue to narrow the gap with the United States in per capita terms. It's going to be bigger than the United States in absolute terms. It already is by one good measure, and it will be by the other good measure without doubt, unless there's global calamity of some sort, which putting aside for the moment. And so the whole idea of American grand strategy is really messed up. And this is, one should understand, this is the third round of American policy in this regard. It was invented for the Soviet Union, and it was deployed in the 1950s vis-a-vis the Soviet Union. And then, interestingly, it was deployed in a lighter way against Japan at the end of the 1980s and early 1990s, because Japan became so successful that even though Japan was our ally and has no army and everything else, Japan basically became an enemy in economic terms, and the United States landed very heavily on Japan and said, you can't export anymore to us, and you have to agree to that, you have to overvalue your currency by 50%, and you have to do all sorts of things because we're not going to let you continue to have the success. And we stopped Japanese growth. So this is the third try of this. But China's not Japan. Japan is 125 million people, and China's 1.4 billion people, and Japan is under the US security umbrella, and China is an independent superpower, and it's not going to sit still the way that Japan did in the early 1990s. China's going to figure out its way around all of this. But that was a big part of what we're seeing right now. So in a deep sense, Mearsheimer was right. China did nothing special to provoke any of this other than achieving rapid economic growth and economic progress. I see nothing extraordinary, of course. Every claim of China's success is they stole it from us, they cheated. This is both fantasy and prejudice mixed together with the fact that everybody steals a bit from everybody else, so there was nothing special about what China did. But in any event, it is the playbook, contain China, and that's a big part of what's going on. But anyway, I said, oh, now reach out to your counterparts. We know all the technocrats in China, all the economic technocrats, of course, because we trained a lot of them. They're our students, and they're our friends for 30 years or 40 years. They said, no, the White House has said no contact. You can't have contact. We're reviewing our China policy. So for the first year, there was no discussion, basically, even at the technocratic level. It was amazing. So wrong-headed, by the way. As an academic, I could keep all the contacts, talk to people, see friends, visit Beijing before COVID hit, and at least keep open channels. But the administration, no open channels at all. And then the idea was the tension must be good for our politics. We'll show how tough we are. We'll continue containment. We'll be more protectionist. We'll have a build in America policy, which is what Biden is trying to do with the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act and so forth. And that is how things went, basically until about 6 months ago. I would add in Nancy Pelosi's absolutely absurd and reckless trip to Taipei. You just can't imagine more irresponsibility than that, in my opinion. And she is enormously irresponsible and just playing for the home crowd. But she went, and so Taiwan is added to this, and President Tsai in Taiwan has also been, in my opinion, irresponsible by rhetoric that is very loose, very dangerous, and in the midst of all of these other tensions, just raising the stakes in a way that allow our worst hotheads, and if you want our very worst hothead, it's Lindsey Graham, dumber you cannot get, and more militaristic you cannot get. He wants war everywhere. This week it's with Iran, but before that it was with China, before that it was with Russia. So this is really our state of affairs, that the protectionism, the grand strategy, the irresponsibility of Washington politicians, I think created all of this. I can't see. China made one mistake, by the way, rhetorically, and that was in 2014 when China launched the Made in China 2025 policy, which is a very smart policy calling for China to become leader in technology in 10 major areas. China said not that we want to advance in these areas, China said we want to dominate in these areas. We want to lead in these areas. That was not a good idea. It would have been much smarter to say, we want to advance in these areas. We could have saved a lot of grief by a different kind of rhetoric. So this is my basic interpretation of where we are right now.